Welcome to Flat Earth Debate. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you have not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside the show while it's live, and a link in the info box once the video has rendered. If you would like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box to join and express your views on the shape of the Earth. There are a couple of rules in the Hangout. Number one, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected. And if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show, as sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel. So please share the show. And one last time, if you are new to the channel or you have not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now, I do have Sleeping Warrior with us. How are you doing, Sleeping Warrior? Good to have you.
Good morning. Good morning. I is good. How are we?
Very well, very well. Good to have you here. So there's a couple of things you want to address in regards to GeoStreamer and Gem Panda and their allegations, accusations and debunkings. So before you do, though, I'll tip my hat to GeoStreamer and to the Rumpus, as they both put a lot of work in. So kudos to you two. But yeah, off you go.
Okay. Start with the most interesting one for me personally. Jeremy has done this series that is basically revolved around his assertions that I am so-called lying. Jeremy doesn't understand the difference between a lie, a mistake, and simply, like, not even a mistake, simply just doing what it says on your model. Now, for a lie to be satisfied, there must be two elements. There must be the element of deceit, which is trying to influence people knowing that something is wrong, and then that it has to actually be incorrect. Now, he's made this big deal about me for the last week, like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and I've ignored it pretty much because the first one was quite funny, but then I've not even watched the other ones because Jeremy doesn't understand what actually is a lie. A lie brings with it the intention to deceive. The observer height was put in from the model that your guys tell us is the shape of the Earth that we live on. So when I put in at 34 or 35 feet, that wasn't a guess. It was just the value that was on Google Earth. Now, whether or not I must have thought it was wrong at the time is irrelevant. And even if I did think it was wrong, for the benefit of the tape, if this was an interview, of course, I didn't. I did question it, but I have no experience at working at elevation or height. It's not something that I do, so it's not something I can consider myself to be skilled in. So I just put in the value that it says, which, after all, is your model. But in any event, even if I did question it, and let's just say I thought it was 40 feet or something, 50 or 100 feet or 200 feet, would I go against what it says on your model if I thought it was wrong? Would I heck? Why would I even consider the possibility that something would be different? I wouldn't. I wouldn't put it in if I felt that it was different, because it is your model. And if I said that it was 50 and it was only 35, just because I thought it, that isn't grounds to put in a different value just to satisfy anybody that might think that I was in some way dishonest. We're testing the model that we're told we live on. The elevation height is 35. That's what it says. Now, basically, the minute the assertion came out that there was this variation of 30 meters, that's 100 feet. That would be relevant, and it would really screw the maths if it was as we were told. So I said to Ranty, let's go back and check it. Now, we went back, we measured it, we came home, and all throughout it, we were in discussions with Nath about the trig, about what the maths was, and basically, it's right. The 35 feet value is correct. It's accurate. I stand by it, and I reassert my position, because fundamentally, it's not that far out. It's a couple of feet. That's accurate for me. For the purposes of this, and given that they need something like 2 miles worth of elevation, it makes no odds. But with regards to the assertion that I was in some way lying for simply using the value stated on your own model, there is no intention to deceive anybody there, because it is your model. That removes the dishonesty bit, but he's pushed it and pushed it and pushed it, and it's got to the point now where I'm not even interested. But when somebody suggested that the variation was 30 meters variable, that really did like wet my taste buds, because it would mess everything up. So all we did was went back to see whether or not 35 feet as per Google Earth was, as a matter of fact, accurate. And when it turned out that it was, I was ready for making a really nice disclosure video proving to the world that I hadn't lied or deceived anybody or anything of that kilter.
Yeah, I'll step in there. So it's me that's talked you out of it, and I'm not afraid to admit it, and I'll give my reasons why. So in essence, this is an argument that is not your argument. You're not testing whether or not Google Earth has accurate elevations when compared to a tape measure run down the side. Now, it's all well and good that you've gone and measured it, and it's all well and good that it does match and Google is suitable for this purpose. In other words, we can use the measurements given on Google Earth. What actually happened once this was sort of done, once they'd got back and I had to think about it, I thought, why would you want to release this information to anybody? None of your position has changed. So it was more that when the conclusion was drawn, which was that nothing has to be altered. There's no disclaimers needing to be made. There's no retractions needing to be made. There's no alterations having to be done. We don't have to redo any of the QED videos. We don't have to do anything. Literally nothing has changed. So at that point you think, well, what is actually the benefit of releasing this information so that it can be scrutinised when it's not part of our argument? It's part of their argument. So from this point on, I'm going to say, well, I've seen it satisfied and to my satisfaction, and I'm going to put my reputation on the line and say, that's what it is. That's perfectly acceptable to use. And if someone comes along and says that you're lying about it, first I'll jump down their throat, but I'll insist that they prove that assertion, because the main reason for going up there is a concern reason more than anything else, which is to say that were it to be out by 30 metres, yeah, some, not all, some of the mathematics done when showing people that there are things that are hidden behind Earth curve could need to have been addressed if you were at 130 feet on that lower observation point. And if you're 100 feet out, 30 metres is what Google quotes, then yeah, there's a good chance that we might be wrong about some of the mathematics we did prior to now. Now, I say some, maybe some, it might not be any, because I seem to remember giving accounts for people who were saying you're over 100 feet, and us having to do the maths on that anyway, so at some stage we would have done those maths anyway. But in reality, every single figure that's been plugged in regards to the observation points has been correct. And every time somebody's challenged you on it, you've said the same thing. I've got a couple of observation points. What Google says is the absolute maximum I can ever be at for this observation is 52 feet. And the observation, I think, really early on that you actually put a figure to on your first video was 34 feet. So in actuality, you've only ever really claimed one actual measurement. And they're all based on exactly the same thing, which is the thing we're testing. You're testing, I'm testing, everyone in Flat Earth is testing, which is the globe. Now, as I understand it, the globe is represented best on Google Earth. Now, if you want to say it's the WS 1984, then you're going to have me pointing out that that's based on an azimuthal equidistant projection at its core. So to use that is a farce. Therefore, we're going to use Google and the values it states. They're not wildly inaccurate, that's been checked. They are good enough to use for these purposes. The other reason I don't want to do it is because if we suddenly have a measure being run down the target point, then I'm going to insist in debate that somebody does exactly the same thing on the Isle of Man for any of the observations, which is preposterous. Nobody's going to do it. It's never ever going to be done. If they can't do it with Ordnance Survey and a decent copy of that on the target, then they're never going to run a tape measure down it. It's ridiculous. So it becomes moot. The only purpose that releasing this information and showing how you've done the measurement would do is open it up to scrutiny in terms of how well you can measure a hill, and that's not what you're testing. So I've suggested, it's obviously entirely up to Anthony and Ranty what they do with their footage, but I've said sodom, if they want to prove you wrong, let them go out and start debunking whether or not Google's altitudes are correct. Let them do it. So in other words, if you want to claim from this point on that Anthony's lying about his height, you better have a damn good video proving that, because it's simply not the case, and I'm just not going to hear it anymore. It's just, it's slightly upsetting when you hear people like Gem Panda or see comments from people like Gem Panda saying, "Oh, right, you're doubling down on your lies now." And you think, right, that's it. I've lost all respect for you, Gem Panda. You've basically gone out of your way to smear somebody using absolutely no evidence, and you're completely and utterly incorrect. There's nothing wrong with what Anthony has done, even if it was wildly inaccurate, which it is not. So to claim that he's lying, to claim that he's fudging his altitudes is just complete nonsense, and anybody who asserts it from this point on is a total and utter disingenuous liar, and you'll have me pointing that out. So that's the reason why I'm telling them not to release it. I don't want to add fuel to a fire that is not beneficial to an argument that points out that the Earth is obviously and observably flat. That's what we're trying to demonstrate, and it's been demonstrated adequately using the measurements on your model. That's the only assertion ever made from this side. That's the only thing being tested. If anybody else wants to go out and debunk the altitudes on Google, be our guest, show us. But from this point on, it's just not going to be an acceptable rhetoric for people to just claim, without any evidence whatsoever, that Anthony's lying about this, because he isn't. He's just using the values on the model. And ultimately speaking, having tested it, having verified it, having made absolutely certain that it's not wildly inaccurate, we can come to the exact same conclusion that we've come to all along, which is that we are seeing things at vast distances that we shouldn't see, should be obscured by Earth curve and are not, are now deemed holographic representations of things that are not there on the heliocentric or sphere models. So you guys have got to do a lot better in terms of debunking the actual presentation that proves the Earth is obviously and observably flat, rather than talking continually about some complete nonsense which is totally farcical, totally incorrect, and from this point on will be labelled as lies and deceit should it come up again. So there's my piece over.
Nate, just share my screen a sec. This whole observer height issue came from this still in the picture. And I remember Jeremy mentioning at the time, he took issue with the words, according to Google Earth, it's around 35 feet tall. Now, I put that in there because that was just showing people where the citation came from. But Jeremy interpreted this to mean that Anthony obviously thought that it was higher because that's why he's distanced himself from it. So that, in Jeremy's mind, that was what Jeremy thought was equivalent to the dishonesty, because that's what he thinks I was doing, distancing myself. And in actual fact, all I'm actually doing is showing that the value given on Google Earth is 35 feet tall. Now, that is what you are expected to do. As a flat earther, you are expected to show your location, which I have, and show what the height is, which I have. And I furthered it by showing it on Google at some point in the video, and I actually put the letters under it saying the height according to Google was whatever it was. I'm just going to try and quickly get through it now to find it. But the point is, Jeremy took issue with the way that this was presented. Now, at the end of the day, there you go, fact 2, at a height of around 34 feet. Now, depending on the exact pixel that you put your hand on, one it'll say 34, the other one will say 35. But it's not, it really is beyond any doubt when you look at this element here and you can see where the picture was taken from. You can see that whatever the height is on Google is what I've used. That instantly negates the argument of being a liar because it's citing your model. Now, I let it go for ages because Jem can be a bit of an idiot, but he carried on and carried on and carried on and carried on. And what he's trying to essentially do is discredit me at all costs. And that's the only thing that you can do because there is a whole heap load of curvature missing. So when I went back, got the measurement, and then spoke to Nathan about it, and we discussed it, initially, I wasn't in agreement with Nathan for not releasing it. I wanted to release it because I wanted to show that Jeremy was wrong. And then Nathan reminded me that it's a distraction. They're simply trying to dispute you and discredit you. So if you conform to the distraction, you take everybody's eyes away from the pot of gold. And he's right. This is not my argument. This is their argument. So I'm going to reiterate Nathan's words. If you're going to assert that I am lying in any way with regards to the observer height, do it with evidence. Go back there, use your fuel, your time, your efforts, your messing up or whatever, and go and do the observation. Come back with the evidence to prove that in some way I lied. Now that requires proving the element of deceit. But let's just say that the deceit was there. Let's say that I did have the intention to deceive. you've got to show that it is something other than 35 feet. And it has to be significant because you've essentially, you need to be at like 4,000 feet to see island. So arguing over tit for tat here is really irrelevant. So what I'm going to say is, if Jeremy carries on with the assertions that in some way I've lied, I want you all to ask him for the evidence to prove that it's wrong, because I've been back with Ranty, I've measured it, and it's accurate. And really, that's all that needs to be said. But because of his attack and this nonchalance, messing around nonsense that he's doing, it's just got to the point where it's become irritable. And it's like, Jeremy, you can't even prove that I had the intention to deceive, let alone that the hill is bigger than 35 feet. You cannot prove what my intention was. But it is self-evident from the video that my intention, whereas as the video says, according to Google Earth, it's 35 feet. It is a hill. And I stand by that. I reassert that. I have not changed my position. Now, I know that it's not wildly inaccurate to 30 meters. That's 100 feet. So are you trying to tell me that I'm 100 feet below the surface of the Earth? Because that's what it would need to be for it to be so wildly wrong. So no, Jeremy, I'm not any other value than what it says on Google Earth. It's been measured, and I'm happy to reassert my position. So if you've got any evidence that in some way it's like 300 feet tall, please present it. Show us how you did it and what your scientific method of measurements were, because we did it and it's accurate. So good luck on that one, Jeremy. Yeah. I look forward to your very public apology on Nathan's channel at some point. Otherwise, you can not bother showing your face again.
Yeah, put him in a timeout because I'm sick of it, to be honest. I'm very disappointed in Panda to continue his smear campaign with no evidence. He's now saying, I've used your evidence. And it's like, well, the evidence wasn't evidence of any sort of measurement being made. So I'm afraid not. And that's precisely why I've told you not to release this footage. Because all that's going to happen is Panda will continue to take apart what you have gone and done in terms of your measurement. And it is open to interpretation, I'm not going to lie. It could be haggled about, discussed, disputed, and I'm just not interested. It's not part of the argument. It would only be part of the argument if it was wildly inaccurate, and it isn't. If it's out at all, it's out by a couple of feet. So I'm just not going to hear it anymore. I'm sick of it. And I'm annoyed. I am annoyed because this has gone on for ages. And up until this point, I didn't have a clue. For all I know, it could have been 200 feet tall. You just don't know. And when I'm literally on your coattails, literally saying, yeah, I agree, I think this seems exactly correct, you've got a shadow of a doubt left in your mind when two people who will not be named go out and say, yeah, it is definitely much, much higher. And then they basically try and like dangle it over you. And you're like, why don't you just release the information? You're making this argument. This is your argument to discredit Anthony. But they didn't release it. So at that point, you're left with a slight ambiguity. It could be out. We could continue to reassert the position that we have. And it could be 100 feet out, which would make us look like idiots if Google was that inaccurate. It isn't that inaccurate. So I'm sick of hearing it. I'm sick of Gemini's smear campaign. It's just, that's all it is. It's got nothing to prove his assertions, and saying he's using our evidence. What evidence? You haven't seen the tape measure and you're not going to, so you've got nothing to make your assertions. Nothing. And I'm tired of it. It's just a smear campaign. You know, you're just a disingenuous person who's out to ruin someone else's reputation, and it's just not on. It's disgusting. And I'm tired of it, Gem. So just give it up. Anyway.
I agree. But the reason why I'm not going to reveal it, and I agree with Nathan now, I didn't initially, but I do now, is that the trig is quite straightforward. All we did was chuck the tape measure down on an angle, got down to the beach level, and then so we knew what the hypotenuse length was, and that's a fact. That's black and white. You can't change it, right? But the bit that you can change is how accurate you are with the measuring device of the angle, because you only need 3 values to get the trig. So you have the 90 degree. That bit's given. We have that if we use the trig. So we know the hypotenuse level. So if once we measure that, and that's black and white, there is no room for ambiguity in it. But the corner, you have to measure the corner. Now, if you measure it from the top angle, bear in mind you stood on top of the hill. When you're looking down, you've got to measure the internal angle from the underside of the ledge that you're sat on, which can give way at any time because it is a receding cliff edge. But if you're trying to do that, that's crazy. So the only way you realistically can do it is to measure it from the bottom. Now, if you measure it from the bottom, no matter what measuring method or device that we use, it won't be considered acceptable because it won't be accurate enough. So what I did was I did it by my own method, which was to give me an approximation. And then if you add in a factor of plus or minus 5 or 10 degrees, then you've got a tolerance that they would argue. And no matter where the value goes, it's still right. So I'm happy. Nathan's happy, Ranty's happy, and I challenge anybody that if you think that I lied about 35 feet, go and produce the evidence. Just be aware that unless you use a theodolite to measure the exact measurement, and it's verified by 16 witnesses that have all signed an oath from a solicitor, then I won't be accepting it, because that's the level of nonsense that you reprobates expect from me. You don't accept. It's simply disproportionately unfair against me. And for that reason, that's the reason why we're not putting the evidence out there, because no matter what value I get here, it will form part of subject for ridicule, scorn, just general horribleness. So it's because of the way that you guys behave. You're not honest. We're not science. We're doing the best that we can. We share a P900 between 6 of us. We don't have theodolites. Sure, I can hire them for 40 quid for the day or whatever. But why should I? You wouldn't do it. And when them two both went back, they didn't produce the GPS coordinates. They didn't even do a pan round. They didn't show their elevation. They calculated their elevation rather than measured it. None of that's acceptable. And if I did that, you would be all over it. So no, I'm not going to release the evidence. And I agree with Nathan. The only value that is black and white is the hypotenuse. And when you put the hypotenuse into a trig calculator and then play around with the values to see what parameters would be acceptable given a tolerance, plus or minus 5 or 10 degrees or whatever, the figure is always relative and it's acceptable. I support it. Nathan agrees and supports it. Ranty agrees and supports it. If anybody else out there thinks that I lied, go and get the measurement yourself.
Let's put it this way, your time. Without giving any details away, I gave you a 66-foot tape measure. I think it was 66 feet. And what you're demonstrating now, I think this is the 34 feet point, which is the one that came under all the scrutiny. That measurement was easily measurable on a 66-foot tape measure. So the hypotenuse is considerably under 66 feet. I'm not going to tell you the measurement. I'm not even going to dignify it. But the point is that measure was easily capable of measuring the hypotenuse, meaning that without any doubt whatsoever, he is so far under 100 feet, to be ridiculous to assert that it is anything like 100 feet or anything like 30 meters out. It isn't. Nowhere near out. You know, just ridiculous assertions made by arseholes. And I'm just tired of it. People in the comments going, oh, right, well, if you're not going to release... No, this isn't our argument. If you want to prove that Google has put the wrong elevations in, go in and do it yourself. Get your own tape measure. Get your own theodolite. You go and prove it. And I'll just dismiss it. Because I don't care if people want to argue about whether or not Google's incorrect in terms of their elevation height. Anthony's maintained the same position the entire time. He's testing that model. And that's all that matters here. That's all that's relevant. It would only be relevant if it was wildly inaccurate. And it isn't. If it's out by anything, it's a couple of feet at the most. So that's pretty much it. Oh, is that my tape measure?
Tape measure.
20. Is it 20 meters?
20 meters, 66 feet.
66
and
feet.
That is sufficient to measure the hypotenuse of the cliff.
So there you go.
Problem. Because if you do the maths on that in any way, the trig, go with the highest value that it could possibly be, that still brings it down to like the value that I cited in the video.
Yeah. Anyway, that's enough of that. Right.
Right. So that's that numpty sorted. Right. Rumpus. Right. This is. Have you looked at Rumpus's video last night with Gio?
I didn't, but I caught little snippets while you and I were on the phone. So we were watching a little bit of it together, you, me, and Chris Monk, maybe 5 minutes. So I've got a little bit of a gist of some of the things that Rumpus said. I don't know. Do you want to do the hammer blow first, or do you want to demonstrate it and then explain it? Because it's already been said to him by me.
Yeah, I think the best way to deal with the Rumpus video at this point, Ranty really wants to do this, but he's not available today. So I don't know whether we should do an in-depth analysis of it tomorrow when Ranty's here, because that's what he wants to do. Yeah,
I'm in no rush to debunk Rumpus, as I've already given him the exact explanation of why it fails on this channel to him personally. So yeah, we're not going to give out anything new in terms of information. I think I've already put it in the chat anyway. So those who are paying attention will know how Rumpus fails. But yeah, I'm more than willing to wait till tomorrow and let Ranty do it. It's his little baby.
What I will do though, I don't want to go through all of it because he went on and on and on and on. And thankfully, I mean, I didn't have to listen to it. That was great. What he's done is he's identified one of these three lights. I think he's done all three. But I'm going to pick on just one of them just for the sake of illustration. Now, he's identified clump of trees, and he's identified the lights that are to the side, and he's identified the thing that's here, and he's claiming that it matches. And I'm not against it matching. It seems plausible, reasonable, and fair. But what's most interesting is, well, I'll show you where he shows it on Google Earth. And then we've basically had this discussion before, but we used, I think it was one of these buildings here, but the same applies. So the clump of trees that he's identified are these ones. They sit at an elevation of 637 feet, and they are on the top of the hill. And I would agree that would match. But this is where it goes wrong, because can you see, Nathan? I mean, is it me, or is there like 3 lights there with maybe a smudge on the right hand side and another one there? But fundamentally, it's not. There's nothing else in this locality that would be, oh, there's a town there. There just appears to be 3, and then 1 or 2 other smaller blemishes that would not constitute anything significantly big. Is that a fair description, would you say?
Yep.
So one of the buildings that he's identified in these buildings of 3, if I just move around here relative to the clump of trees, if one of the lights that he claims relative to the clump of trees is in fact this one, then another one, for example, might be this one, and then the third one might be this one, for example. But there's like all of this is missing. That is not present in the evidence. Now, Rumpus's claim, and he's preempted this, and he knows that this is going to be contentious. He's preempted it by saying that it's all fell into a ravine. There's a ravine here. There is a hill here. But bearing in mind that they've got a line of sight to every single building that's on here, the ravine argument fails, because unless the ravine is bending away from the camera and these are on the blind side of the ravine, every single building has got a line of sight. So the problem would be, if you're going to argue that Baldrine has fell into the ravine the way he does, then you would expect to see the extremity ones that are not in the ravine, particularly these ones, because the ravine edge is just this hill bit here. It's literally this hill bit. But this bit doesn't constitute the word ravine, or valley, I think was the word he used, because this bit's essentially flat. It's only this hill bit here. So he's describing it as a valley or a ravine, and that's simply misrepresentation. So he's using that to try and get around the fact that this whole area, if you're really going to argue that we can see these buildings that are here, okay, then it makes sense that I could argue successfully that these will be seen too. Because although they're lower, there's a lot more of them. And even if we go with this high part here, that is about 350 feet, 500 feet, it's 150 feet lower, but we would see these on the horizon and they would be evidenced in the picture. But there is nothing that supports the idea that these are in any way accurate. Now, if they are accurate, the trees sit at an elevation of 630 compared to this one that sits at 500. So this would mean that this value would be 630 and then this would be 500, right? Which is fine. So, but then nothing below it is visible. None of this actually exists. There's all of these lower stuff here don't exist on the evidence, right? But he argues that they fall into the ravine. Well, I don't agree with that bit, but let's just say that these values are correct. So we've got 635
Sorry, I just want to correct you there. He said it kind of sits in a ravine. He said it's all very complicated. There's lots to be explained about it, but yes, I won't do that now. So Rumpus didn't actually give a decent explanation to why he's claiming we can't see any of this stuff. He just showed a profile of the elevation and said it all sits in this ravine. And then we went back immediately and checked that claim, and it failed completely.
So what I'm going to show now is where Rumpus's claim fundamentally fails, and it's really easy to do, and it hasn't changed from the last time he presented this. All he's done is moved it a little bit, and it's all very well saying how accurate and careful he's been with his calcs, but if they don't match real world, all he's been is carefully wrong. Do you know what I mean? It's got to match. So we've got a distance of 38.62, right? Now this isn't that difficult, but you're going to have to imagine, you're going to have to use your mind to work out how much we should see. 38.62 is the distance. So 38.62. Now the viewer height now becomes an issue because I'm not sure. Gio's in chat. Gio, if you were able to tell me what the observer height he used was, it would be great because I'd like to know what he actually used. But I'm going to reassert my position. I'm going to stand my ground and say that the element that we gave you, it was the higher value, was 52. I'm standing by it. Unless somebody can produce evidence to the contrary, 52 is all it is. So I reckon he's done at least 100. maybe 150. He needs 400. But let's just say he did 100. I'm refusing to accept 100, and I'm standing by what it says on Google Earth. Unless somebody can get accurate, scientifically valid, witnessed by 6 witnesses, all signed with a sworn affidavit from a solicitor and all that nonsense, with GPS coordinates and all that, then we're going with what it says on your model. A, because it is your model, but B, because it isn't wildly inaccurate. So I'm going to put that value in. And I'm not even going to put the 100, because I think we might have done 100 at some points just to appease Lewis. And even when we did 100, it was funny. But anyway, in any event, the point is, the value that they all apply is 483 feet. So remember that number, 483 feet. The farm sits at 500 feet. So relative to the hidden value of 483 feet, it's, what's that? 483, 93. So it's 18 feet above the horizon, okay? And then this one sits at 600. So if that's correct, this is going to sit 18 feet above the horizon. Is that 18 feet above the horizon? No. Relative to the horizon, possibly. Not relative to what we see.
You mean relative to the top of the hill? Not relative to the horizon, relative to the top of the hill.
Yeah, relative to the top of the hill, possibly. Relative to the horizon, no. But even if we put in the value of 100, which is what we gave to Lewis for the sake of Lewis's nonsense argument, we're still at 368 feet. So 368 feet, and the farm sits at 504. So 368, 468, 500, it's 150 feet above the horizon. So if it's the case that 100 feet was to be used, is that 150 feet? No, it's nowhere near it. It's 150 feet would literally bring it to, say, let me just get one of these links. 150 feet is going to be about there. So it's still out. So even if you use the higher value of 100,
you can have to stop doing this. I'm sorry. Why are you using the higher value? Who cares what they've said in terms of the value? It's wrong. No one's going to go and get an actual measurement, so they're just asserting this nonsense without any proof, without any evidence. It's not what Google give. So why use it?
So Gio's put in chat that it was 115, right? So I'm going to do 2 things now with the 115.
Nah, firstly, why? It's not 115. Who cares what Gio Streber says? Go and get a tape measure, Gio. Show us that it's 115, otherwise I couldn't care less. I'm not interested in doing this, Anthony. Not anymore.
Okay.
Couldn't care less what he thinks it is, or what it would work out to if it was 100.
I can see... I don't really agree with your viewpoint. I'd like to show it at 115, but I can see why you say it, and I'll support it, because you are right. There's no reason, there's no science or evidence reason to go with 115 unless you've got evidence to prove that it's correct. Now, I've been back and I've measured it, and the 35 feet at the lower elevation stands. So if we're going to apply, and I am applying 35 feet at the lower elevation... I just want to address
this, because to be fair to Gio, although he's, for some reason, the link isn't actually working, so he can't actually join. I will stick it in once you've done this. My apologies if you've been trying to join. The link's dead. So anyway...
No, he won't be joining. He's on that protest. He won't be joining. No need to apologise.
In either event, I was just going to say that he has said, Nathan Oakley, Miles was there and measured it. Okay, well, if that's your assertion that we need to ignore the value given on Google Earth, let's see it. That's your claim. Right. So let's see you provide your evidence for that claim. Not Miles asserted it. I don't care what Miles has asserted.
I agree with you. Nathan Oakley, the OS map shows it to be about 115 feet. This value was measured by professional surveyors. Are you claiming they're bad at their job or lying? No, what we're claiming is that I've measured the height of the 35 feet cliff face at the lower elevation, and it's accurate. Is there any reason for why I should reject the other measurements at the higher element unless you can produce evidence to the contrary? And the answer is no. So without evidence to the contrary of actual measurements, all you've got is an Ordnance Survey map with a different value on it to what Google Earth is. And I'm not arguing against Ordnance Survey. I'm arguing against Google Earth. But if you are going to use Ordnance Survey at 115 feet, then we should be using the Ordnance Survey for the elevations down this neck of the woods as well. We're not checking Ordnance Survey. I'm not interested in what they say. I'm interested in, does your model do what your model says it does? And the answer is, of course, no. But even if he's used 115 feet, I was quite happy to show what that 115 feet does, because it doesn't bring these things high enough off the horizon to justify it being 115. He needs at least 250. Well, 235.
Just one other point. I said this earlier. WS 1984 has an azimuthal equidistant projection at its core. So if you're going to cite things that have used the geodetic datum, i.e. the Ordnance Survey maps, you must accept that that is based on an azimuthal equidistant projection. Now, I don't accept that as a flat Earth model, but it's a point that a lot of other flat earthers would jump all over. So I'm going to say it again. The WS 1984, the datum that is used to produce the Ordnance Survey maps in most instances, is based on an azimuthal equidistant projection, not a globe.
Now, Paul, tell us how you measured to mean sea level. Well, given that the Metabunk calculator is based not on mean sea level, it's based on the actual sea level, whatever the actual height of the water is. If we get down to the highest point that the water can possibly be, and Miles goes back and does his observations when it's at high tide, there is no issue. We don't have to get it down to mean sea level. We only have to get it down to the highest tide level.
Chris. Google takes it from mean sea level.
That would mean we would take stuff off.
Yeah, this is it. This is why I didn't want to get into the tape measure measurements, because while your side of the argument, although this seems beneficial, and I'm not going to lie, is that if you've got the measurement of the hypotenuse, you can obviously say it's less than that. You know, once you take, that's the biggest angle on the triangle, the biggest length on the triangle. Therefore, it's going to be less. And you're going to have someone like Paul come along and say, well, what about the sea level? Yes, correct. That would add up more. But the two are going to average out to about the same. And it's still not putting Google out by 100 feet, even if it was 10 feet out when you added on sea level and minused off the calculation for the hypotenuse to get the actual drop of the height that he's taking the observation from. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and it's never going to put him anywhere near 100 feet from that observation. Just nowhere near. No amount of fudging is going to get him anywhere near the heights you've claimed. None.
Well, in any event, their argument with the Metabunk calculator is that it's the height above water, not the height above mean sea level. So if we were to apply the trigonometry to the mean sea level, let's just say that the mean sea level was down here, for argument's sake, that would make their 35 feet claim from mean sea level even worse for you guys, because it would reduce, because we take off up to the highest point, which is where all the ballers always do their observations from. I didn't go down and do it from lowest sea level. I just did it based on the clarity of the day. But Miles went back at absolute highest tide, conveniently, and then tried to claim it. Now, it's because their 35 feet is measured from mean sea level, we're only doing it from highest sea level. So there should be a reduction from 35, not an addition, Paul. So it isn't correct to say that I've measured it wrong. It's correct to say that we need to make an adjustment because we don't use mean sea level when we're using Metabunk. We only use the actual height of the sea. That's the problem that you guys have got. And for that reason, there are no concessions. So when it comes to these dots here, and we come to Rumpus's maths, he's used 115. Well, there is no scientific or evidential reason to apply anything more than what it says on Google Earth. So unless you guys want to go back and measure it somehow, send Miles back, and then he'll measure it and then not come back with the information for weeks, if at all. But there is no reason in evidence to use any value other than what it says on Google Earth, because that is what we're testing, and it is accurate for this purpose. And I stand by it. I couldn't say that before because it was a fair critique, but I'm not saying it anymore. I'm now saying that we're going to use the 52 feet cited on there, and then you can have a variation for the tide, and we'll put it up to 60. That's it. You're not having any more.
I don't see why you want to use a variation for the tide when Google has it pegged at mean sea level. That's where they're saying they've got their measurements from. That's what Chris said. That's why he used whatever it was, 50, 55 or whatever he put into the QED demonstration. I think it might have been 52. But again, why give them anything at all? We're using their model. That's what their model states. That's what the figure will be.
So we'll put it back down to the 52 that their model
Just don't see why you should concede anything. If someone comes along with evidence and digs a trench from the sea all the way back to that cliff and then runs a tape measure down that bit, or as you put it, go out with a theodolite and a surveyor and get it absolutely to the inch, then, you know, other than that, it's just total nonsense. It's just an assertion that people want to make. They just want to make their maths easier with no evidence, none. And there's no justifiable reason whatsoever to change these numbers. You know, when it was Ordnance Survey, I was like, let's insist on getting it into those rings and finding out what the value is, and then doing the same on the target height. And that's the number you use. You know, if it says 40 on an Ordnance Survey map, you use 40. That's it. End of story. That's the number. That's the reference. That's the way that people, when they see it demonstrated, can go back, have a little look, and see where the figure was referenced from. Not where the figure was referenced from plus some ad hoc adding and subtracting. It's just nonsense. You know, it's simple. We're testing your model. Those are the model values. If the model's wrong and they're giving incorrect values, you go out and you prove that. Because I'm not interested at all.
And the other thing is, Gio just says in the chat now, he says, oh, where's my chat window gone? He's just said, there it is. We don't use Google Earth for height measurements because we have more precise tools. Well, I don't care what precise tools you've got. You haven't got any evidence.
I do. I'm interested in that. If you want to go and measure the cliff at St. Bees with your really precise tools, and you want to go and measure the Morgord Lighthouse with your really precise tools, we've got a fair playing field on both sides. However, if you want to go to the nth degree, dicing up the observation position with a tape measure and with theodolites and all sorts of other lasers or whatever you use, and then you just want to go to the Ordnance Survey leisure map when you're looking at the target, I'm going to laugh at you. So in other words, be prepared to get measurements for both target and observation position if you're going to use this method. Other than that, I'm more than happy to use Ordnance Survey and point out to you that it's based on an AE projection, or we'll use Google Earth. That's it. Those are your reference points. Those are your figures. I don't care what people want to add or subtract anymore. We've gone beyond that. This is nonsense now. It's just people who want to smear you. That's the only real purpose here. It doesn't add anything or subtract anything from your argument unless Google's wildly inaccurate, and it isn't. So I'm going to stop ranting and actually sort out this link. It's been broken for the entire show, so give me 2 secs.
It's okay. But my point was that even if you have got measuring devices that are more accurate than Google, you haven't got any evidence based on them accurate tools, have you? And that's fundamentally the point. So I don't really care whether you have got more accurate or not. What matters is, have you got any evidence? And you haven't. And Paul, but you measured to verify Google, didn't you? Well, we measured to see how accurate or inaccurate the claim of the 30-meter variation on the elevation was. Because you guys apply 30 meters as the absolute maximum, and I find that simply preposterous. So you must have measured to mean sea level, yeah? Otherwise, you didn't verify Google Earth, and your assertions are baseless. No, that's correct. We didn't measure it down to the mean sea level because the sea was halfway in, and I didn't have a long enough tape measure to do that. So I only measured it down to the beach. Now, the problem with that is, yes, Google did measure the 35 feet down to the mean sea level. Now, I only did it down to the beach, which is higher, but I still got a value that was consistent with what their value would be, whether you're putting the math or not. So, point is, Google Earth is accurate. For the purposes of this observation, I stand by it, I reassert my position, unless any of you retards, dishonest or otherwise, have any evidence to support the assertion of making it disproportionately huge, then we're putting that value in because it's supporting and it's accurate for this purpose. And it supports me, it doesn't support you. So F you, Jeremy, and F you, Paul, and F you, Rumpus, and Geo, 115 feet isn't right. You've got no evidence, scientific or otherwise, to support that. You need measurements. You need proof. And then we'll scrutinize how you measured it and whether you got GPS coordinates and signed affidavits from a solicitor and all that nonsense. And that's the reason why I'm not releasing it, because all you would do is attack that as a means of distraction. So we're putting back in the values that it says. Now, the problem with Rumpus's thing is that when he identifies these buildings, it drops them down to basically the horizon, a couple of pixels above the horizon, and that's an issue. It seems to, for some reason, selectively not address Baldrine as in the evidence. And the only logical conclusion that you can possibly come to is that the whole town of Baldrine, to the left of the 3 lights, is missing on the evidence. I don't accept it's fallen into a ravine, because the whole town would not be visible. It would not be invisible by this ravine that you claim. That isn't even a ravine. It's just a hill on one side. On that basis, Paul, Rumpus, it doesn't match up. So the fact that it sits on the horizon for the lights is an issue. And the fact that the ravine and the whole town of Baldrine missing is an issue. You haven't got it right. That means all of your calculations are on the wrong scale. Every single one of them. So it doesn't matter how careful you've just been carefully wrong. And I again, maintain my position. We haven't changed our position, and I'm reasserting it. We know what them lights are. They have not changed. Why? Because we've measured it. We've got the scale right. How? We used a 3D model to do it. How did we know that? Well, thanks to Chris, who knows how to do it. He was able to plug them all into Blender. Saved us from doing all these calculations. All he had to do was find 2 or 3 points that we knew and then put it in, and that gave us the scale. So no, Rumpus, you've still got it wrong. Your lights sit just above the horizon, not massively above, like it does show in the evidence. Baldrine is not shown in the evidence on your observation point. I don't accept that the ravine would magically make them all disappear. So on that basis, we're left with nothing, Rumpus. Your whole representation last night that you took, I mean, obviously you've spent time on it, but you haven't got it right. It's wrong. Now, I'm not even going to go in any further because Ranty wants to take the glory tomorrow. But the point is, they don't sit above the horizon. There is enough elevation above the horizon that we see that proves that your scale is wrong. And even if you were right, just represent my screen, Nath, if you would, because this is the crescendo of my point, and then we can sit back and relax for a minute. Even if it was the case that you had the correct idea, oops, get rid of that.
Gone all quiet.
Pardon?
Gone all quiet.
I've gone quiet.
Yeah, I don't know if you just moved in front of your mic, but you went all quiet.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's right. So even if it is the case that Rumpus has got the lights correct, and my position is that they're not correct, when we look back at the evidence, the problem that Rumpus has is if these lights are where Rumpus says, that means that we can limit and see what these points are. So let's just go back to Google Earth and then look to the left, and we see that there's land here behind that's higher. I'm not going to reposition it all because I just can't be bothered. But the point is, this land here would mean that would be this. So if you're going to go with this as your point, great. But where's the rest of the land? Because there is no more land. But in the evidence, you can see that it would take you to about here somewhere. But all this other land is still yet to be accounted for. So even if we go with Rumpus, and I don't agree that he's got it right in any event, but let's just say for argument's sake he did, you are literally left with all of this land here stopping about here. No, it's a bit further. It's about there. So what about all the rest of the land, Rumpus? You didn't address any of that in the thing. So again, Rumpus, you haven't got the scale right. There's a lot of land that's unaccounted for. So I guess that's the end of the rant for today. Rumpus, no, you haven't got the scale right because you're still failing to address all the land.
Cool. So I'll do a quick link, as the actual link to join the show is now definitely working. Let's just put that on that. So hopefully you've enjoyed the presentation as opposed to debate. Hopefully we will get some debate in this show. As I say, the link is now working. If you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth debate. If you would like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside the show while it's live, and a link in the info box once the show has rendered. If you would like to join the show, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box, which is now there, to join the show and express your views on the shape of the Earth. There are a couple of rules. Please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the show using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. If you haven't done so already, please share the show, as sharing increases the live audience, of course, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel. So please share the show. And one last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth debate. There is about an hour and 10 minutes left on this broadcast.
All right, Nath, 2 comments. I'll read 2 comments and then want you to respond. Sleeping Warrior claims Rumpus's scale is wrong, but provides no scale of his own is capable of locating anything. Show us how the bearings compare with the non-existent scale that you're using. Nath, do you want to address that?
Well, there's a couple of things that we pointed out to the Rumpus, which is that as he's looking at his scale and as he's picking out these items, he is not accounting for parallax. And as he's self-confessed, you know, there's no zoom function on Google. Now, the extent that Chris has gone to is to program in the exact camera and its focal length and its zoom at the time that the image was taken in order to get the correct parallax. So he's also gone to the extent of completely recompositing it inside Blender so that you have it representative of what the camera actually did. So these guys that are basically taking the composite and using it as is, as Ranty has produced it, and basically just lining up the pixels, that will never, ever, ever account for the parallax change that happens as you sweep the camera at zoom. So they haven't got it right, and they're never going to. The effort that Chris went to was literally to unstitch, pull apart every single frame and match it on the arc that the camera sweeps through, and then program in the exact camera that was used and the focal length and distance at zoom so that he could correctly match up all the parallax and get it all to work and look correct as you sweep through the image. Further to that, Ranty's actually physically matched up the landscape. So we've said this before, but Google has to be representative at the short scale, close in, when you're looking at things in relatively fine detail. It has to match. You're not going to have somebody from Baldrine or Balacanal come along and go, that doesn't look anything like what my edge of the cliff by my town looks like as I go past in my fishing boat. It has to represent reality from that perspective. So from that point of view, when Ranty's matching up close scale with what we actually see in the image, and it's identical, it's very tough to argue with that. So for the guys, I keep seeing these in the comments, the people that go to Peak Finder, this is something else Chris can do. You might remember the name of the type of presentation he did, but he did this for us literally yesterday. So he changes the type of representation that his wireframe model is showing by literally putting an outline around the mountains at a fixed point. So in other words, there's no parallax change. It is essentially the same as what you'd get from Peak Finder. And you look at it at distance and you can get it to all line up. The problem is that when he overlays the actual camera and its rotation on the image above in a different wireframe, you can see how wildly inaccurate it is as you sweep the camera. So for all these guys using pixels and red bars and all this stuff, you're never going to get it right. For a start, you've just been lazy and just used Ranty's flat image for something that's representative of a camera sweeping through an arc. So, you know, admittedly, Chris is probably about 1,000 hours into this now or something bonkers, but he's put the work in. So we're quite happy and confident to assert our position in terms of what we've matched up. And the same applies in terms of the viewer height. Nothing has changed. None of our representations and demonstrations of what we have accurately matched up and visually matches perfectly is ever going to change until somebody comes along and does both what Chris has done and what Ranty has done to a better extent. And nobody's going to do it. You can't get better than perfect. You can't get better to within a foot of it actually matching. Not matching and then towns being missing. You know, none of this nonsense. It matches. If you want to challenge it, provide something better. We've demonstrated this time and time and time again. Now, if you want to better that, go ahead. So far, nobody's bettering it. They're coming up with excuses why stuff isn't there. It's in a ravine. This entire town, you couldn't see it if you looked at it because it's in a ravine, right? Okay, well, yeah, you can, because Google does actually represent what the world looks like in the short scale. You know, that is what it looks like. You'd have a lot of complaints if your town didn't look like your town. So ultimately speaking, just claiming that it's not there because you can't see it is exactly the same defence Sly uses. These, quote, smokestacks aren't there because I can't find them, therefore they're not there. You can't change the evidence, lads. It's there. If it's there on the image, you need to find it and match it up with something on a map. Don't care what map, but so long as it matches and you can represent it in the same way that Chris and Ranty have represented it. And they have gone to considerably more efforts than any of the challengers. Hence we're so smug. Why wouldn't we be? We're right.
Now, Gio and Paul Voice have both been questioning the parallax issue because I think they might misunderstand why you're correct and they get it wrong. The photo was taken from 30, 40, 50 miles away. Now, you cannot fix your camera on Google Earth and zoom in. What you have to do is traverse on Google Earth. But when you traverse up to that point to see the land, you change the parallax on Google Earth. Now, the parallax in real world doesn't change because obviously you're at 35, 40, 50 miles away. But because you have to zoom in on Google Earth, that changes the parallax. So it's not the zoom on the camera that changes the parallax. It's the zooming in on Google Earth that changes the parallax. And yeah, sure, if you line everything up with regards to Peak Finder, yeah, that does do it. But when you do that, you don't get any of the nothing lines up. And that's the reason why that's wrong. You have to do it as though you're stood where the camera was when it was zoomed in, but that changes the parallax. So it's not the zooming of the camera that's changing the parallax. It's the process of moving your observer on Google Earth that changes the parallax. So we're not saying the camera does it. We're saying that it has to be done by Google because you can't zoom in on Google. So Gio's got it the wrong way around. So as Paul doesn't understand it. That's the reason why they can't identify any of these buildings and show them as consistent with the evidence, because they're getting it wrong. They've got the scale wrong. They've always had the scale wrong. And Rene has the scale wrong because he tried to... Oh, and there was one other guy, the liar, you know, the key liar, the one that publicly tried calling and making a big deal over Ranty. He does the same thing. He doesn't even identify the buildings to allow us to test his scale. He does all the calculations and all the pixels and all this nonsense. And when I asked him to produce evidence to prove what the buildings would be, he's ignored it. So I've removed my comments from his video. I won't be even mentioning his name. He isn't worth it. And I don't want anybody to go and look at his video because he isn't worth the exposure. Sleeping Warrior, I didn't use Google Earth to calculate my bearings, so you barked up wrong. So you're barking up the wrong tree. I'm not saying that you did use Google Earth, but you have to use Google Earth to match the evidence. Because if you don't use Google Earth and you're expecting us to just accept what you're telling us to be true, no, Paul. We've matched it up with the Google Earth. We've done it relative to the observer, which does change the parallax, which is why we didn't use the peaks. And when we matched it on Google Earth, we then compared and contrasted it to the evidence. And hey, guess what? It matches. All parts of it match. And the only time it doesn't match is when you start getting right the way down the far end of the island where you've got to put your camera in a different position because of the parallax point. But in any event, you guys can't match up anything because you can't identify the three lights and you can't get them high enough off the horizon to match. Yeah, you might get three lights that seem to line up, but the right sat on the horizon when you apply the curve calcs. That is a problem. There is a lot of elevation missing and that curve is not there. So what you're arguing for is you're misidentifying the lights, claiming that you've identified them that don't match the evidence because there is no curve. You can't get lights that match the evidence because it proves that the Earth is flat. That's why you're all making this big presentation about how wonderful it looks. And let's be honest, Rumpus probably spent the whole presentation criticizing me, saying, oh, I don't understand this and I don't understand that, failing to acknowledge or realize that what he's claiming, he's identifying, is wrong. It does not match. You can't have a whole town swallowed up by a ravine that isn't even a ravine. It's simply a hill on one side only. So that's basically Jeremy, and that's basically Rumpus dealt with. I don't know what else we need to talk about now because there's nothing else worth mentioning in terms of the that contentious point. But just in case anybody's unsure, I stand by the 35 feet. It's not wildly inaccurate. It's not 35 meters worth of inaccurate or 30 meters of inaccurate. It's 1 or 2 feet at the most.
On a different note, so just so people in the chat are aware, I've got no issue with anybody saying whatever they like. The chat is a free-for-all. You can literally say anything. If you want to badmouth me and say disgusting things about me, you're welcome to. I don't care. All I'm asking is that you don't fill it up with smileys, because it just means that no one can see anything, because it's all smileys. So that's all I'm asking. I will stop timing you out regardless of what you say if you just stop spamming smileys. That's all I'm asking. I understand if you want to get it out of your system and do a million of them now, I'll let you. But please, please stop spamming smileys. I beg of you.
Sleeping Warrior is being dishonest, right? So using that word, Paul, you've got to prove that I've got some element to deceive, okay? So let's see the element of deceit that you claim that I'm producing. He's diverting with a non-existent parallax issue. No, it's prevalent, Paul, because if you don't do the parallax issue, you line it up with the peaks from 30 miles away, but you can't see anything because you can't zoom in on Google Earth. You can't identify anything because Google Earth doesn't have a P900 zoom, does not allow you to do it. So you have to address parallax. It isn't a non-existent parallax issue. It's a prevalent parallax issue. And it's the reason why you guys can't get the right scale. It's a problem of its own creation that does not in reality exist. Strawman. All right, Nath, do you want to explain why it's not a strawman? Maybe I've not understood. Maybe I didn't do it in a way that Paul understood. Perhaps I was not very eloquent.
Yeah, give up on him. I'd
Okay.
rather sit in silence.
Paul. If you don't get
he
it,
wants
Paul,
to
you're
join
just being
and present
dishonest.
his point in a more coherent way than in amongst the smileys, spammers, and keyboard warriors, then, you know, fine. But I don't know. I'm rapidly losing interest with these people who claim to be boycotting.
Oh. Okay, so in that case, then let's change topics. Let's up the gear a little bit, and I'd like to just reassert the position that if the Earth was in fact a ball, and we were in fact spinning, you could get a gyroscope and you could head east, and it would record a speed of 15 degrees per hour when you were stationary. If you headed east, you would get double, and if you headed west, it would get halved, and that would prove the rotation of the Earth. Guess what? Friction in the bearings is claimed as the reason for why it doesn't do it. Well, John Savage showed that the friction in the bearings were perfectly adequate to demonstrate the 15 degrees of rotation in an hour. So it's nonsense. So why does a gyroscope not do anything when you put it stationary on a windowsill? If you drive east, it doesn't change. If you drive west, it doesn't change. Planes all over the world would have no purpose for a gyroscope if they were flying around a ball. Fundamentally and principally, it fails to do the thing that it would be expected to do if we lived on a spherical ball. We don't live on a spherical ball because gyroscopes would show it. There is no rotation. There is no curvature. If there was, gyroscopes would be the proof. They don't do it. Gravity. Nobody can isolate gravity as a force or a whatever you want to call it by science, because if they could identify it, they would be able to show it, and they can't, because every time they try showing something gravity-wise, it's density, and they can't prove otherwise. Anytime they try doing it, it's always in the International Space Station, and anything in International Space Station generally is considered to be lacking credibility because we know that they lie. So whatever's going on inside that tin can that's floating around in space, they say, none of us can prove what's really going on because it appears to be underwater at the best of times. And even when it's not at the best of times, it looks like it's a vomit comet or similar. So this nonsense to do with gravity being demonstrated by the International Space Station, that's about as credible in evidence as it is saying about arguing about going to the moon on the Apollo moon missions or 9/11 or Paul Voigt's maths. So the reality is gravity, they can't prove. Rotation, they can't prove. Curvature, they can't prove. And you have these people
Molten
in chat
iron
telling
core.
you that they're in a ball. Say again?
I say molten iron core they can't prove.
Oh yeah, I'd forgotten about that. Paul Voigt claims that we still have this molten iron core, yet still hasn't produced any evidence to show that molten iron self-perpetuates itself, even just molten state, let alone supercritical. But apparently supercritical is too high for them to be able to prove it. But molten, still no evidence to prove that molten iron is capable of self-perpetuation. It's a joke. And then you have all the people that follow. Mike Bardos. Please finish your Venus argument from a few days ago. Something about looking at Pluto once the sun goes down. All right. So if you think about if you line up all the planets in the solar system and you put them in a straight line, you've got the sun in the middle, you've got Mercury, Venus, and then you've got Earth. If the Earth spins on its axis, half the day, 12 hours, it would be facing towards the sun. Half the day, 12 hours, it would be facing away from the sun. When it goes into the point after 12 hours where it starts to face away from the sun, we can't see Venus because we're looking away from it. It's behind us. It's below the curve of the Earth. But we can see Venus at nighttime. That means that we are not facing towards Pluto at the relevant moment. That is impossible on the heliocentric model. And I tell you what also is impossible. If you think about all the pictures that they show us, the animations that they show us for the sun in regards to the eclipse, they always put the sun as this big ball and it's always in the distance and they always show the parallel light rays. And relative to the size of the Earth, the sun is huge. Now, what that means is you could get a marble and put it in front of a car headlight, and that's kind of like the effect that you would get from the sun. So the beam of headlight would dwarf all the way around the Earth. And what that would mean for the observer on the Earth at midnight, you would get around all of your horizon, you would get bleed light from the sun. It would bleed over the horizon, and we would never get total darkness at nighttime because we would get that little bit of redshift that they claim is the reason for the lunar eclipse. That would be passing round, and we would always have a horizon full of sunlight at all times. It would be even at midnight, but you would still see the horizon with light coming from on a funny angle. You would see the light passing around you, and you can just put a small marble in front of the headlight, and you'll see the effect. But we don't see that. Why? Because the sun is local to us. Otherwise, you wouldn't get pitch black. You wouldn't get pitch black night times. Yes, you would be in the shadow, but the horizon would be carrying light bleed all the way around you, and you would see it. So when that doesn't happen, we get pitch black nights. What else is there, Nath? What other things are there that are just nonsense in the nonsense arguments?
Curvature.
The easy ones that we can
Curvature,
prove.
generally speaking, is a complete nonsense.
What is?
Curvature.
Yeah, curvature. There is no. I mean, why is it curved? Why did they? Right, this is where I'm going to plug Nick's video from Phuket Word. Perspective is the curvature. One of his more recent videos is named or titled something of that nature. Perspective is curvature. Go and watch that because that makes some incredibly good points. I don't agree with everything he says in the video, but the main points that he makes in that video are absolutely correct. So Nick from Phuket Word, stop it. Nick from Phuket Word's video on curvature being perspective. Go and have a look at that because that's a really good video for anyone that's curious about what is the explanations of a lot of stuff on a flat plane. Lily lies to cover up his past lies. Well, I'm gonna have to go and let these dogs out. They're mithering me.
Yeah, no worries.
Give me 3 minutes while I go make a brew while I'm here. I'll probably end up getting sniped. Actually, what I'll do, if I go and do this, I'm going to end up getting sniped.
I'm going to do some shout outs. I don't care either way, like I say.
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll leave the call and I'll leave the hangout in the background and I'll rejoin it in a sec.
No worries.
All right, I'll be back shortly.
Shout out to Paper Explanator. Good to see you. Jamie O'Keefe. Thanks for being here. Ranty's Cumberbund Chrome domain. He's been timed out for spamming. Presumably the same exact spammer over and over again. PC Police, nice to see you as well. Tony, good to have you here. NASA Says, thanks for being here. Lumberjacks Black. Hello, Renee.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Hello again.
Hello.
So, who's online? Only you?
Just me at the moment.
Ah, okay. Listen, have you... Can I share my screen?
Push can.
Let's just take the whole thing. Tell me when you can see.
Yep, we
my,
see.
Yeah, I got a few questions. First of all, these lights you're talking about, 3 lights, have you calculated how far they could be apart if they were on a straight line?
Maybe get all your questions out.
Oh,
the reason I say that, Renee, without causing too much offence, is because often you come on, but you say, right, I've got a presentation, and then your starting point is to ask us a question about what we think. Listen, and we've presented it a few times now.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'll make a presentation. I'll show something here with Google Earth. This here is lining up as good as I can with the top of your pre-layered picture. Can you agree? Would you say yes or no to that? Hello.
You are presenting, Rene.
Okay, thank you. I'm asking you, can you see my Google Earth?
Yes, I can see it. You are presenting.
Okay.
Feel free to
Thank
spout your rhetoric,
Yeah.
make your presentation, but rhetorical
What?
questions all the way through is kind of what I'm trying to hope to avoid. So, you know, make your assertions.
Okay.
Don't ask me to agree with them.
Does this look the same as the Google Earth image on your free layer picture?
So you're asking me, does this look like what? Does this look like the picture that Anthony took? No, nothing like it.
No. Does it look like this one here at the top of the building? Top of the picture here. This one here.
I'm going to bring it back up and I'll tell you if it looks like it's the same to me.
Yeah.
There you go. If you can put them next to each other. A bit higher.
I can't.
It's okay. I can't really tell, if I'm honest.
I know.
It looks like it's at a different angle to me, if I'm honest. That's as much as I can say.
Yeah. They look... Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay, don't worry.
I
can roughly from what you've shown, it kind of looks like it's at a different angle, the one on top.
Okay, different angle.
Yeah.
Let me see. I have a bad memory. Randy, is he's not coming today, is he?
No, he's back on tomorrow though.
Okay, damn. Well, basically, let's say this is accurate to what he shows me. If I put in Douglas Head Apartments, this is a block I placed on Douglas Head Apartment. So it shows up here. And if I do the same thing with Langlis, it shows up here.
Okay.
So shouldn't it be on the other side of Douglas Head Apartment?
Well, I mean, what you're showing me seems to be missing what is known as, or labelled as, Douglas Head / tuft of trees on some of the images. But in this image that I see now, it doesn't appear. It doesn't seem to be there.
Douglas Head Apartments.
Sure,
Did we agree?
The actual Douglas Head Apartments sit on the left-hand side of what's known as the tuft of trees, and in this image now, that just doesn't seem to be there. I can't see it at all. So in terms of whether it matches the photograph, well, no, absolutely not.
So
does it match? Does it roughly match? It's just yeah. Okay, carry on. Sorry.
Do you agree that Landless Lighthouse should be on the other side here, somewhere around here?
This is what Ranty has demonstrated, and we've been trying to get across to people in terms of the parallax change that occurs as you move in and move out on Google Earth.
Yeah, I switch back to Illustrator and zoom in on this here. Is this correct? You can see this is where the lighthouse is, and I just draw a straight line up to this image here.
Okay.
And this is Douglas Head Apartments, straight up here. Is that where I would expect Douglas Head to be? No.
So Ranty has done a demonstration on this channel called Ranty's Parallax problem. And in essence, the problem that occurs is, as you look at the top image, this is Google Earth, you're looking at it from this vantage point with this focal length. Yeah?
Yeah.
So as you move further around the island, which is effectively the only version of zoom that Google has, as you would move that top image in Google Earth around, the parallax changes. So you get a physical parallax change. And Ranty's shown this on a video. As I say, it's a fairly short video. I think it's 10 minutes long, where it's called Ranty's Parallax problem. And he demonstrates exactly this.
Okay. So this Google, this up here does not match these two down here.
Yeah, as you get further down the coast, the parallax changes at distance. Correct.
Okay. So.
Or to put it another way,
So basically,
match,
up here, if
yeah.
if this is right, then if we could turn on the lighthouse picking up, it will turn up around here.
Correct. If you were from this vantage point looking at the detail that's in the close near foreground, then correct. If you were standing,
I understand.
but the problem with that, René, is that
I was looking at the videotape.
Yeah.
Where you describe how you made this composite photo, and I got the impression that this was how you found some of the points below.
No. So in terms of where the locations have been marked out, what Chris has done is he's taken a LiDAR map and an overhead view of, it's a flat still, but it's obviously representative of the sphere that is presented in Google Earth. And he's overlaid those two on top of each other and then put a wireframe model to the LiDAR map. So he has a 3D representation of all the peaks. And then he's triangulated those after curving the actual flat composite, the bottom image, the actual photograph. He's curved that round the curve that the camera would actually sweep through, and then matched it all with the focal length of a P900 at the zoom it was at, so that he can correctly match the parallax. And that's when we're identifying the buildings, that's how. But in terms of what you see on the image above, you will never ever get Google to match it in its entirety, because there's a huge parallax problem. As you go up to parts of the island, it forces the parallax further down the image to change. The only way to do it, and no one would accept this, would be to take this image on the top from Google, move the camera angle around, and stitch that together. But that no one's ever going to accept that. So the very best compromise that Ranty could find using Google Earth was this.
Was that one? Okay,
yeah.
That he didn't explain.
Sure. Well, I mean, you're right. It's hard to get it across to an audience that we're not matching it with Google Earth, apart from to show literally a visual representation of what Google shows you at a near distance, because it is representative. You know, it's using similar software to what Chris is using, i.e. Blender, to make these wireframes and put all the polygons on to make the top image in Google Earth render as though it was your town, your village, your hill, your bit of scarred landscape next to the coast, whatever you're looking at. That's how it makes it. So, but because of the way Google Earth works, it puts you into a flat plane. When you drop below a certain, I think it's 1,000 feet, it drops you into the plane map view. And when you come up above 1,000 feet, which is what we're doing for all of these demonstrations with the 3D image, you're not in a plane view, you're in a sphere view. So it alters how it works, along with you not being physically able to replicate what a camera does from the beach at St. Bees. You know, it's nowhere near, it's massively out in terms of the parallax then, because you can't replicate zoom in Google. So your only option is to go in painstakingly, a bit at a time, and match up what the coast actually looks like versus what's in the picture. And we've done this and checked it with people who live on the island, and that's how we've matched it. In terms of could we stitch all the Google separate stills together to make it 100% accurate on the top image when using Google Earth? Well, no. We're trying to point out why Google Earth isn't useful and doesn't represent our world, and why it's flawed. So I can see your criticism, but your criticism, like the people claiming the altitude or observation height is wrong, your criticism is with Google. You know, and in terms of the real world image, you can't criticize that. It's a photograph. It's just what it is. So yeah, I agree with you. You can't get an accurate representation from Google, and that's not what we've done to accurately map out these things. That's not how we've got the locations. We're not using pixels. We're using a topographical scan of the land that's been done with a you know, it's a LiDAR scan that's been wireframe modelled, and then, like I say, the actual composite itself has been curved around the arc of a camera, and everything's been triangulated in its actual position and matched, cross-referenced, and Chris has got it to within a foot. We know we're right about this.
Not so sure, but
yeah, that's fine. You perfectly. You keep coming back. We love it, René. Keep coming back and tell us how we're wrong. Show us that you've done it better.
Oh, who's back?
Sleeping Warrior's back. So Ranty's back tomorrow, but if you want to pick Sleeping Warrior's brains, he's here now.
Okay.
I have a question though, Renee. You said that there was a satellite that you guys get your communications from, and I asked you if you could go away and get us some more information so we could see, hopefully, the evidence of this thing that you believe is up there that's sending you your magic from space. Have you managed to find any evidence of your satellite?
Didn't I send you a link to a text PDF file?
You did, and don't you remember that when we did the link, we showed that there were no photographs in it whatsoever of the thing that we think that we have line of sight with, and the last thing I asked you to do was go and get us some evidence to support the assertion that the line of sight.
A satellite in geostationary orbit with ordinary cameras.
Sure, but have you got any evidence of the satellite in geostationary orbit of which you believe that your thing is sending magic from space from?
Hey, DMP.
Have you checked the Wikipedia page for geostationary orbit?
You gotta establish their criteria for evidence, bro.
Can you explain what you mean?
It's like Nathan basically wants you to turn him into a satellite to prove a satellite's going to orbit the Earth. That's his criteria for evidence. He wants you to like blast him off into space on a rocket and put him into orbit, or else it's not good enough evidence for Nathan.
Me?
Well,
I'm not asking for anything.
Well, I think it's fair to say that composite pictures that look like cartoons are not acceptable evidence of a satellite existing in space, something that requires a line of sight.
Well, who cares, Riley? Because you could look at it with telescopes, so it doesn't even matter.
Right, so that's what I'm asking for. Evidence through a telescope of a satellite that he believes that he's getting magic from space from.
Plenty of people. Why don't you just go look at a telescope through your telescope? I mean,
I'm
satellite through your telescope.
And I'm asking him to prove his claim.
Yeah, but your criteria for evidence is like totally unreasonable to the point where no one could prove anything. So,
well, you just said if you could look through
it's just a dog and pony show with you.
You just said that you can look through a telescope and see it. So why would it be unreasonable to?
Well, why don't you go do that? Because lots of flat earthers have done that, but you seem to be too fucking ignorant to do it.
No need to swear. He's not the one making the assertion.
Don't swear.
He's not claiming they're up there.
Nathan.
Yes.
Could you you live in England, right?
Yes.
Doesn't anyone near you have a satellite?
A satellite?
A TV dish? No, not a satellite. A dish that receives satellite signals.
One outside my door. I can see one now. I can see one literally now.
Yeah, okay. Where does that point?
At the horizon.
At the horizon?
Yeah.
Are you absolutely sure that? Yeah, okay, of course you are. But the question is, how does it look?
No, the question is, what is it looking at?
Yeah, what's it pointing at?
What is it looking at?
Yeah, well, if it's pointing at the horizon, it could equally be pointing at a ground tower with a massive amplifier pumping out a signal. Well, that could be what it's pointing at. You're claiming that it's pointing at a geostationary satellite that's at the horizon line, specifically for that satellite and everyone else's satellite on the curve that also point at the horizon, as they all do.
In pictures, if you go to, let's say...
Nathan, I grew up with I had a satellite TV growing up, and we had to point it at the satellite, and we had... And when there was storms, we didn't get any signal.
Yeah, sure, you have to point it at the satellite, but which direction was it pointing? What was the angle?
I mean, you did it. I did it on the television a lot.
I mean,
for example, you cannot.
Which direction was it pointing? I mean, I've just said mine's pointing at the horizon because it is. I'm literally looking at it. So, which way were you pointing the satellite? Are you saying you're pointing it at 45 degrees up at the sky?
I didn't point it. You had to point it through a program on the television.
Correct.
But it would get out of alignment. And I mean, I didn't go up on my roof and look where it was pointing, but I remember like you had to go into the television and align the thing.
Yeah, I mean, so that's absolutely true.
If you didn't point it in the right direction, you wouldn't get a signal.
No, I get that, but you could change your angle 2 directions on 2 planes, vertically and horizontally, and I would assert that it's horizontally that you would change that if you're going to pick up a quote unquote different satellite. Whereas if you're going to assert that you're changing the position of that dish on the vertical, then that's a totally different argument. I mean, I've seen Paul Voigt presented a very interesting picture where he showed people on the equator with what looked like aerials because they were complete wireframes, but nevertheless they were pointing straight up, and he asserted they were satellite receiving dishes. So that for me is a bit of a mystery. You know, it's one of those that I don't have an explanation, but in terms of what I can see out my window, it points at the horizon.
Like, why would we have to provide evidence of satellites when it's absolutely abundant everywhere?
Well then it should be easy to find.
That's what we're asking for.
It should be easy to prove then.
But it's completely abundant all over the place. Like,
so find one and show us.
You're making an assertion that there is no evidence, but
no, I'm not saying that. We're saying show us the evidence that they exist, and so far not so good. So far, lots of people have come on and asserted their beliefs based on extrapolations.
Yeah. What is your criteria for evidence?
Well, a cartoon picture is not it.
I got something.
So can you answer my question?
Seeing it.
A photograph through a telescope, that was what you said was easily done. That would be acceptable.
Someone showed you that. I watched it happen.
Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, put it on. Hold on one sec.
So can you tell us your real criteria for evidence? Because that's not it, since you've been shown that.
Well, you assess it on its quality, so I'd like to see one.
In space, a photograph would be sufficient.
You've been shown all of this.
Well, I've never seen that. Hold on, you can see what's being presented. I've not seen this before, so
right now.
Can you tell us what we're looking at?
I don't understand.
Rene, can you tell us what we're looking at, please?
We're looking at geostationary satellites taken from a telescope, looking from Earth.
Okay, give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to go up to my screen and have a closer look. Bear with me a second.
I'll see if I can zoom in.
I see squares, and I see some of them look like they've got smears in them.
Yeah, but can you see the...
they just look like blurry pixels.
Listen,
I saw a satellite with my naked eye.
They look like blurry pixels.
Yes, exactly. That's what they are.
So a blurry pixel's acceptable evidence for you guys to prove satellites if they're not acceptable evidence for us to prove lighthouses at Langness.
I was just about to say that. So what we have at Langness is, in some instances, probably a similar number of pixels, maybe 6 or 8 pixels, which is...
But if you look at the picture, you can see these lines here.
Oh, hold on, just let me
I've seen a satellite with my naked eye, Riley.
Can I just say,
totally
bear with me a
second,
second, P.
Anecdotal evidence, dude.
I just want to get this point in. So
how can I not prove it?
I'm just trying to explain. You've asked for the standard, and now I'm saying
I witnessed it. That's evidence. If a witness in court, if I witness a crime, that's evidence, Riley.
Unless you're lying.
Yeah, but it's subject to the Turnbull guidelines, of which they say do not rely entirely on witness statements because they can be often wrong.
But you don't have to, because there's tons of evidence everywhere for satellites. So you don't have to rely on my witness
P.
statement.
I'm talking about it, P.
So we have a claim.
Yeah, so just before we get off this subject,
there's no claim.
P,
I mean, you haven't. There's no like dispute that satellites exist.
There is. That's what's happening literally right now.
Where?
Right now, literally as we speak,
but you're
that's
not
exactly what is happening.
Like,
so for you to assert there's no discussion about the subject when we are literally discussing it, that is ridiculous, P. Come on, just let me get my point. It's going to take me 10 seconds.
No, you don't have any justification to dispute satellites.
You haven't heard it yet.
Well,
You haven't heard it. I might be agreeing. You haven't heard it. You just won't let me talk.
Okay.
I might be agreeing. What I'm going to say might be in agreement. You just don't know yet, P. You're just triggered.
Let's talk about...
No, Rene, I want to get my point in. Bear with me. I want to get my one point in. Whether it gets in, I don't mind if it takes 10 minutes. Can you put it back up, please? Just a second, Rene.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, I'll have to find it. Yeah.
There we go. So what we have in the case of Langness Lighthouse is a similar number of pixels as some of the ones I've just gone and looked at. Maybe 6 or 8 pixels. And in the case of Langness Lighthouse, there is a literal picture of Langness Lighthouse and its shape and size to compare it to the pixels, and they look the same. So I can look at it and go, that looks the same as the presentation taken from 50 feet away, even though it's 51 miles away. Now in this case, we've got a similar number of pixels, so maybe if you can show me one of those, specifically one of those clusters of pixels, and compare it to the satellite it represents, so I can make a similar sort of judgment call. Does it look like a lighthouse? Yes, it does. It's lighthouse shaped. Does this look like a satellite?
That's a ridiculous exercise and nonsense.
Okay.
The problem is
this is just pixels. So if I was just to show you Lagness, if I was just to show you
how you
Lagness,
establish whether things exist in your life, Nathan. Like,
yeah, well, it's exactly where it says. It's exactly where it says.
That's why you're such a useless person.
It's exactly where it says it should be on the map, and we have a comparison that we can compare it to, and we've done all of the above to establish whether or not it is that thing. And we've done exactly that. Now, what you're doing is tantamount to me just presenting you. Hold on, it's tantamount to me showing you
by doing
only the pixels of the lighthouse. P, for God's sake, why are you so triggered today? What is it about satellites that you're so attached to?
I'm not triggered. I don't understand. Like,
I'm trying to explain. You keep talking over me and getting annoyed.
Justify not believing in satellites.
I'm trying to explain that. You've said it 4 times, P. You're getting annoying. You keep saying, why'd you keep asking me why you have a justification in this? You're just repeating yourself again and again with the same point. It just makes no sense. I'm trying to explain. You won't let me.
But you're not giving me any reason to not believe in satellites.
You're not letting me.
Yeah, let him. P-Miles, let him speak.
So, if I was to present the Lagness Lighthouse on a black backdrop, just the pixels themselves, and nothing else, and assert that that is Lagness Lighthouse, you would reject it out of hand if there was absolutely nothing to compare it to, nothing to triangulate it with, nothing to assert that that's where it is. And that's exactly what's happening here. A cluster of pixels with a box around, and we just have to accept that that is the satellite with nothing to compare it to, nothing to verify that it's in that position, nothing. So it's rubbish.
That's a ridiculous analogy. I don't accept your analogy. And
okay, well
because there's like way more evidence.
Lottie's joined and left. Why? Lottie, I thought you would say something.
But how much time do we have left?
Half an hour.
Okay, good.
I just wondered.
Nathan.
Yes.
You know GPS, right?
Say that again.
You know GPS. The global and positioning system. I'm showing on your screen now the Wikipedia page right now.
Cool.
Do you know it?
I have used a GPS receiver on a few occasions.
Yes. So.
What a joke! See.
If this is not satellite based, have you some kind of idea what it is if it's not satellite based?
Yeah, an advancement in the Lorenz system, which would use ground-based towers. And coincidentally, we have a lot of ground-based towers. We also have a situation... Hold on. We also have a situation where we lose planes, where there aren't any ground-based towers. So maybe I can ask you the question, why do we lose planes where there are no ground-based towers if we have global coverage?
Transponder.
I didn't get to the end of my question.
We don't lose planes. That's a flat Earth propaganda lie.
We've never lost planes.
If you actually do research into it, Nathan.
So we found them.
I don't know what you do. Deliver groceries. We don't lose planes on GPS, Nathan. That's a flat Earth lie. You should look.
So what happened to MH370 and why couldn't they find it?
Because someone shot off the transceiver.
That's a funny coincidence.
Is there any evidence that that's true?
Let's see the evidence for that, Rene. Let's hear
Where's the evidence that we lose planes on GPS?
Sorry, did you not hear what Sleeping Warrior just said to you? Hold on, Rene. P. Mars, did you not hear what
you're making assertions without showing any evidence, and that you're asking this guy to show evidence for satellites existing? That's ridiculous.
Fact. There is a plane that went missing. That is a fact. Yes. Are you going to challenge that fact, P?
No, I'm not going to challenge that fact.
Right,
we lost it.
How you doing, human?
I have no idea why.
Hold on. How you doing, human?
Hello, it is I, Human Sheeple.
Good to see you, Human Sheeple. Thanks for being here.
No. Listen,
I would just like to say thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Good. So the answer to why that plane went missing is, according to you, on a plane that we've lost, someone turned off the GPS receiver, correct?
No, they turned off the transponder. Every plane has a transponder that sent out its position. And if you turn that one off, it's actually only military radars who can track it.
Dawn Treader, say hello.
Hi.
Hey, Dawn.
Well,
I just popped on to say Human Sheeple runs a Discord cult of Flat Earth. They indoctrinate people every day. The horrible person. No, this is lies. I do not do cult. I am very, very, very honest guy. I've got screenshots of you indoctrinating people, mate. I wouldn't have them on your show if I was you.
What you got,
Mr.
Dawn?
Threader, you are lying. Please stop telling the lies. Thank you. I've got screenshots.
Let's have a look then.
I'm not going to put them on now.
Why not?
Please provide evidence of human sheeple in cult. I would like evidence. Thank you. No.
For what?
Okay, so what's your purpose in being here?
I just wanted to say that. I can join in on the satellites conversation.
Cool. That would be brilliant. Let's see what you got to say on satellites, Dawn.
Let me just say something on the satellites. If it's rejected that if PMARS doesn't accept the position that Nathan gave with regard to the pixels, perhaps we could have an ulterior explanation or an alternative explanation for what we're looking at with regards to the smears that are claimed to be geostationary satellites. Am I sharing at the minute? Who's sharing? Anybody?
No.
I am. Yeah, this one.
Okay, so Nath, if you wouldn't mind, would you share my screen?
Sure.
So on the Metacult website, there's a lot of information about Project Loon, which is the Google thing to do with helium balloons. And given that helium is apparently NASA spends more money on helium than it does on rocket fuel. They are the biggest consumer of helium out there, and Project Loon is something that is a thing. It is there. Is it not more feasible, probable, and likely?
Flat Earth destroyed. How you doing? Can you hear us? Say hello? Hello?
Is it not more feasible, likely, probable that what we're seeing in the blurs, the pixel blurs that Renee's producing on screen, are significantly closer and significantly smaller and would be reasonably explained by Project Loon?
No, it's not, because if you look at this picture, I find again, you can see this is a long exposure. So these lines here, they are actually stars. They're star trails. And you can see the satellite.
How do you know how far away they are?
Hold on. Let me finish.
The satellites are staying in the exact same position relative to the camera, but the stars are moving.
Yeah.
This is impossible with a balloon. You can't keep a balloon that stable.
No. How can you tell how far away these smears are that are not moving?
Smears.
Yeah.
Yes, the satellites. You can look up, if you look up. Sorry, I have to. Here, they are 35,786 kilometers.
Okay.
In geostationary orbit.
You need to end this smear campaign, Riley.
Hang on a minute. You're saying that these satellites are at 22,000 miles?
Yeah.
Bear with me.
And because of that, their orbit time is 24 hours. The closer you are to the Earth, the faster is your orbit time.
Got an approximate size of any of these, Renee? How big are one of these satellites in your picture? The picture you had up earlier. How big are they? Size of a car? Size of a bus?
I have a question for Mr. Oakley.
Sure.
Why you speak to ballers? These people are no good. They are cognitive dissonance.
Oh, God, kill him.
Renee's actually a really nice guy.
Do you think?
I know, but they are brainwashed and they do not listen. They have very mental problems.
When you eat one.
That's what we think about you, mate.
I was brainwashed by Dave Matthews Band's song "Satellite."
Mr. Threader, you come to my Discord and I remove you because you make racist remark about flat earther no good. I observe you. It's disgusting what you're doing there.
Can you not hijack Renee's point, please?
I provide very informative detail for world to see.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, your best mate in that server, his explanation for the eclipse was Rahu. He says he's got a Rahu model. Yes, Rahu is correct. Correct model, hiding eclipse. He is good man, he knows.
Excellent.
Right.
Anyway, sorry, Renee, you continue.
Yeah, okay. Listen.
Sorry, baller, you can continue now. I was just talking with other baller.
No problem.
If if let's say it's 35,000, this one here, we go to a page called angular size.
Hate that geezer.
Cool. Angular size, yeah. With you so far?
Yeah. Let's see. We're gonna calculate for angular size, and we'll do it in, let's say, seconds.
Is this guy even talking English? I can't understand.
Danish.
Ja, okay, jeg snakker dansk. Og hvad så?
That sounded like Chinese when you're ordering food.
Anyway, can we just cut the racism and let him get to the end?
This guy is, I tell you, he has been in my server. I know he fake. He is lying to you.
Not lying. He's just presenting his argument. He's not. Anyway,
he is
sorry
trying
about
to believe you. Please believe.
Cool. He's cutting and pasting it in so we get an angular size. Great.
Yeah. And the size. How big is the geostationary satellite? That's 20 meters.
20 meters.
Yeah. That means it has an angular size of 0.1 seconds. 1 second.
But I thought Hubble's got like a 0.3 second angular resolution. So you're saying that to see it, you need something that's better in terms of its angular resolution than the Hubble?
Yeah, it's angular size. Let's say
I am Human Sheeple. Human Sheeple.
The angular size
that's
seems
what
way
you do
too...
to your cult. You turn them all into sheeple.
Sorry, guys. Can you just calm down?
Believing in a fantasy.
Yeah.
Dawn, please don't send me sexy messages anymore. No good.
Please, can you
fantasy with no proofs.
Can I join your cult?
Yeah.
You don't want it.
The angular size is way too small to see.
No.
Yeah,
I am Human Sheeple. My cult has a weight.
Guys, I'm going to start booting you out if you can't shut up. Leave your humour for the gaps. Just leave your humour for the gaps. I'll let you get away with it if you're not talking over somebody's point. He's only going to make it and it's going to take him 60 seconds and you can do as much jokes as you like.
If I calculate the angular size of the ISS, it comes with 500 kilometers and 120 meters in whatever, in size. It comes up to about 49 seconds.
Sorry, you've just changed the ISS. So the satellite that you just took us to was 0.1 of an arc second in size. That's tiny.
Yeah, 1/10 of an arc second.
Right, well, I've just said the Hubble has got a 0.3 arc second resolution. So you're telling me that Hubble couldn't see this thing, yet you've got some amateur astronomer footage of it? Are you having me on?
So, Nathan, you know you were just
shut your mouth.
Pixel.
Shut up. Rene, do you understand what I've just said to you or not?
Yeah, okay.
What do you mean, yeah, okay? Do you understand that it's too small to see, that satellite that you've just shown us the calculation for its arc second resolution? You understand that, right? It's too small.
I don't think it can see. The Hubble telescope is not designed to see something that close.
No, what I've said is the Hubble has got 0.3, I'm sure it's 0.3. If I'm incorrect, feel free to berate me in the comments, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. So this is too small to see with Hubble. You know, that Hubble's pretty good. It's got a pretty good, you know. Well, if you're going to correct me and say that it's big enough to see,
remember,
then you know I'll go away and I'll research my position better.
At objects that is light years across. It's looking at galaxies.
Doesn't matter. It's just how big it is in arc seconds that matters. You know, this thing in arc seconds, get this right, you're saying it's half the size in arc seconds of the lunar rover on the moon. That's 0.2 of an arc second. This is 0.1. So it's half the size of the lunar rover. And you're telling me we can see it at whatever ridiculous distance.
This is Human. Can Human talk?
So you can't see this thing. It's too small to see. So I don't really understand what the... So what's the photo of?
You need a very high-powered telescope to see it.
Hello?
Guys, please.
Who is that guy interrupting?
I don't know.
The cult leader.
Okay.
I am Human Sheeple. Please talk me first. Thank you.
I mean, like I say, I'll check out my position. It's a long time since I've looked at arc measurements of things that are tiny in the sky. But from what I can ascertain, I think I'm correct in saying that from the measurement you've just shown us, that thing's too small to see.
Nathan, some of the pictures of the satellites, the pixels are all pictures of the lighthouse.
We're talking about satellites. We've had a specific picture of a specific satellite, and then he's gone and calculated out how many arc seconds. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
So why are you asking me about a lighthouse?
You don't need all that information to believe in satellites.
Well, I'd need to know that you could see it. Let's just correct Dawn. Hold on, it's okay, Rennie. I just want to correct Dawn. I would need to be absolutely certain that it was possible to be seen, and from what I can see so far, it isn't. You get
just
that,
like
Dawn?
We need to be certain that Ireland is possible to be seen.
Yeah, that's a different argument, isn't it? What you're doing is now trying to take off the point that you've tried to make and failed. So what I'm pointing out to Renee...
No, I'm just telling you, you've got double standards. That's what.
Not double standards. Not at all.
Well, yeah, let me give you an example of what
double standard.
No,
big time double standard.
Nice, just one sec. Let me give you a good example of double standards. Refraction is often described as the word negligible, and negligible is calculated by Mick West on the Metabunk site as anything around about 15 degrees, which obviously is not negligible. What is negligible is the amount of, when you look at the horizon and they say that you do actually look down from the horizon, but it's such a small value that you wouldn't even notice it. That is negligible, and that word is used to describe the amount of reduction off the horizon that you actually look when seeing the sphericity of the Earth with regards to the drop on the horizon. That's negligible. We wouldn't see it. Yet when refraction and negligible is described, for some reason 15% is seen to be acceptable. If that's not double standards, I don't know what is.
But how many ice creams do you have?
Nathan.
Yes.
Yeah. Can we go back to GPS for a moment?
Yeah. You go ahead.
Yes. So you say that GPS is based on towers on the Earth, right?
Maybe.
I
don't know.
So you're not even okay? Because I mean, GPS is not the only positioning system in the world. I mean, the Russians got one. It's called Glasnak. It's here.
Okay.
This one here. And this one is the Chinese version of it. They also got a worldwide satellite navigation system. Galileo, you probably heard of that. Have you? Well, you're paying for it.
I've heard of Galileo.
So you have heard of it.
I am not Galileo. I am human sheeple. I am from not cult. I have wife and kids, very precious, no problem. Yeah, you probably indoctrinate them as well, mate.
Same applies to any of these, though, Renee. I mean, yes, this is a listing on a Wikipedia page, and the guy a couple of days ago was saying, well, I can go and get you a video of it going up into space. And, that might be the case for any of these as well. But in terms of actually proving that it's in space, in geostationary orbit, everyone's just got excuses for why we can't have that. And then when you've shown it us, it seems to be too small to actually see, which is a bit worrying. So, again, so far, not so good.
You were talking about those aerials pointing straight up, Nathan. I can't remember where you said they were.
You know much about those?
The wild ones. What do you think they're pointing at?
Don't know. I'm not on the equator and I don't own one.
No, but what do you think? Why do you think they're pointed upwards?
Who cares what I think? Does it matter what I think about it? Does it matter what my single opinion on this concern is? Who cares?
Well, yeah, you're hosting a debate. Like,
my opinion is just one of many. So if I can assert an opinion in that regard with some evidence to back it up, then I might. But I don't have any. Sorry.
Should we go to Riley's point? He just said it's the focal point of a beam. That's what they're pointing at. What do you mean?
Well, the requirement for a satellite to communicate is a line of sight. We know the further that a beam of sight or the further away from something it gets, whatever signal it receives suffers from something called diffusion, and it gets wider. The beam gets wider, which is the reason why Jaren's struggling with his satellite experiment, because he can't get the laser to stay focal on one point. It disperses and gets wider, conical, if you will. So we know that you need a line of sight, and we know that things that are really far away, the beam splays out and gets bigger, conical shaped. Yet they still require a very, very, very accurate, precise point in the sky that they point to. How is that the case when the beam gets wider and wider and wider? And if they are like, what was it, 2,000 miles away? Arave, do you want to say hello?
Hey, Arave.
Hello.
Good to have you.
I don't know how to answer that point, really.
It doesn't need a precise point in the sky if the beam dispersion is so pronounced from such a big distance away. It just needs to point roughly in the area, and it'll pick.
Yeah, that's what we do with our dishes.
Yeah, but they're very, very precise, though. You only need to be half of 1 degree off, and you'll miss it.
No.
If there's a firmament dome, couldn't they propagate signals off of the dome? Y'all saw the video where they talked about, the dome having reflective properties and that they studied it, mapped it, and all this other stuff. I think it's like a 12-second video.
Yeah, there's no dome. No proof for a dome whatsoever.
Maybe the satellites just
proof for a
drive
dome.
around the dome.
The dome idea comes from a fiction book thousands of years ago.
Yeah, but you agree we live in a pressurized environment, right?
Hold on. You got a first edition of this 1,000-year-old book, Dawn Treader UK?
I just made the number 1,000. I don't know how old the Bible is. It's very old, and it's definitely a fiction
It's the Bible
book.
you're citing, is it?
He is known liar. You must not trust him. He is known liar.
Well, I mean, how do you explain rainbows then?
How
Rainbows need a mirror. What mirror is there outside to make a rainbow? How do we live next to a vacuum without the vacuum sucking out the air from our Earth into space without some sort of enclosure?
Vacuums don't suck.
The vacuum, or rather the air in our atmosphere rushing away from Earth towards space to find equilibrium. Then
why would it rush away from Earth?
Avoid not being sucked into the
vacuums don't suck.
The air going into space.
Vacuums don't suck.
The general principle is that next to a vacuum, stuff will try to go to equilibrium. Though, how do we keep the air from our planet trying to go to the vacuum without some sort of covering?
I'm pretty sure it's gravity.
Things point to a dome. There are a couple things that point to some sort of enclosure. Closing off our world from the outside.
We lose atmosphere to space. So,
do we?
Yeah. We live in a pressurized environment, and a pressurized environment needs a membrane between it and the other variant, which would be the space. Otherwise, space would suck the vacuum off the atmosphere off the Earth.
It's called atmospheric escape.
So what holds the atmosphere on? Don't say gravity.
Don't say gravity.
Why not?
Because you can't prove gravity.
Yeah.
What
you can.
What will require to prove gravity?
Gravity.
When your criteria for proof is so high, you can't prove anything.
Well, proof for gravity is that I'm sitting on my chair right now, not flying out the window.
No, that's just that you're done more dense than the air that you're sat in.
No.
Water, you float.
Density doesn't dictate a direction.
How does a zero?
No. There is no direction.
There's no gravity.
Yeah, the direction is towards the Earth.
Density also doesn't.
Direction. That's just a relative state of density over buoyancy.
No, density and buoyancy don't dictate a direction.
There is no direction.
Yeah, direction down.
That down is
like I said, I'm on my chair. I'm not on my ceiling right now.
He knows we can prove gravity.
Down is a label that you give to more dense.
No. Density doesn't dictate a direction.
Down is a label to more dense.
Like I say, density. Down is a label that you give.
That's a flat earth fallacy lie, Riley. You know it.
Well, if you could prove that it was gravity over density, then you would be able to do that. And there is no
proof
evidence.
is that density doesn't dictate a direction. But the thing holding me to the chair does.
Gravity. There is no direction. It's simply the term more dense or less dense. It's relative to the environment that you're in.
Gravity is just acceleration, Riley. How could acceleration be density? That's it. This doesn't make any logical sense, dude.
Do you know how a fractional distillation column works?
What?
Do you know how a fractional...
I am Human Sheeple. Human
You're a cult leader.
I guess it's true what they say about Anthony Riley.
He was funny the first time. Third time, fourth time, fifth time, not so funny, guys. Work on your bit.
So again, do you know how
it's not funny? It's horrific.
Research comedy.
Yeah, exactly, P. Research comedy, guys. You're not getting the laughs you got when you first came, notice?
It's not comedy. It's actually true.
Do you know how a fractional distillation column works?
I have no idea what that is, sorry.
Okay. A chimney that you heat, like crude oil is an example where they would use a fractional distillation column. Alcohol creation is fractional distillation.
You can't go into clever stuff after you just use density as a reason why we go down.
Why not?
Well, you described the word down. I say that is simply a description of a word that you apply
towards Earth. Towards Earth, then forget the down.
But it isn't a direction. It's just a state of density over buoyancy that you
towards Earth is not a direction.
No, in density over buoyancy, it's simply a state of more dense. You just call it down.
So you're saying Earth is the bottom of everything, and you know
unless it's free to move, yes.
That's a huge, arrogant assumption, and you can't
nothing
prove it.
Can go past it unless it's fluid. But as the Earth is solid, nothing can push past it unless its density is far greater than the resistance of the Earth itself.
So according to you, there's nothing under the Earth.
No, that's not what I said.
What do you think it is? Lava all the way down?
I don't know. We've only drilled 8 miles down, and that's as far as
I don't know. The thing is, we do know. There's a model that explains exactly what's there.
What does?
A model of globe Earth.
Your model explains it. Yeah, but can it prove it?
I don't know. I've never looked into proof, but
well, we know that
it goes much further than it goes much further than I don't know.
Well, we know that the deepest hole that has ever been dug is 8 miles, right? They call a super deep borehole. What evidence is there?
We just can't know what's deeper.
One at a time, please.
Say again, Don.
We just can't know what goes deeper because we've only gone 8 miles. So,
right, but your model can predict it, though, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
There you go, then. So that solves everything. Your model predicts it, but the only thing we can actually prove is as far down as 8 miles. Everything else is conjecture. It's open to debate, right?
Kind of.
There you
but
go.
You know that we're much further along than I don't know. Which is your point on your model.
Evidence-wise, you're only as far as 8 miles.
That's much better. I'll have a little guess.
So what does the flat Earth model say about what's below 8 miles?
I don't know. We don't have one. I don't have one.
We shouldn't guess stuff that we don't know. We should basically prove it, and then we can make evidential claims to what we can prove.
And with that, I'm going to say a massive, huge, enormous thank you, first and foremost, to the live audience for tuning in and hopefully sharing this show. Also, a massive thank you to all of the debating panel for making this debate possible. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.